Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and I'm back today to do another video. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up as well as reading stats for the month video. However, before I get into all of that, I did want to point out that I'm no longer going to be following my upload schedule that I set for September, moving into October and likely November. So in the beginning of September, I believe in my September TBR talk, which I'll put a link to up in the cards above so you can see how well I did in terms of following my TBR. I said that I was going to be uploading every Thursday and Sunday, and while I did enjoy doing that, it was a really fun way to kind of think of new video ideas and just put out more content in general. I had a lot less time to do kind of other things that I need to work on, including reading. My reading definitely took a dip in terms of the number of books I read this month, but also I'm hoping to use the month of October as my primary kind of writing and editing month for my personal statement for my grad school applications, and then probably moving into November as well, I'll be finalizing those applications. And so I kind of need that extra time, as doing it during my workday is possible. It's not really ideal. I do kind of need that extra time on the weekends and in the evenings that I've been spending instead editing videos, which I do love editing videos, but I need to focus on my grad school apps. So with all of that being said, I'm only going to be uploading on Sundays and occasionally may upload at some point during the week if I have another video that's pretty easy to put out, at least for this month and probably moving forward until like Thanksgiving time. So I'm sure none of you really care about this update because most of the people that kind of watch my channel and are like commenters and friends of mine that I've made here on YouTube also don't seem to have like set upload schedules because we all lead very busy lives. With all of that being said, let's just jump into my reading wrap up. During the month of September, I ended up reading 9 books, which is the lowest number of books that I've read since quarantine lockdown started, which is still quite a number of books. Like, there are many people that read 9 books over the course of an entire year, so I'm not like displeased whatsoever about reading 9 books, but I definitely felt that I was reading less during this month. And I do also think that's largely attributed to the fact that I work now 40 hours a week, and when I get home at 5 p.m. after spending, 10 hours with children, I am exhausted. So that definitely like did not surprise me that I was reading less this month, but it is something that I kind of noted as I was working through these reading stats. That being said, this is not the month that I read the lowest in 2020. I actually only read like 6 books, I think, in February, so I'm still kind of better than my lowest month of 2020, and I do think in October I will be able to hopefully read some more, especially because I'm planning on reading some shorter books during October. Which, speaking of October, I actually finished 2 books right at the beginning of October that were kind of, I'm counting as September reads, so I'm going to talk about them in my reading stats and in this video as September reading, but I did finish 2 of the books in October. So my October's already off to a great start, given that it's the 4th of October and I finished 2 books, and I likely will finish 2 more today. So my October is going very well in terms of reading thus far, but I am including those 2 books, and I'll point them out as books that I finished in September, but really I finished them in October. But when you're working and October starts on a Thursday, you gotta just extend like September just like a little bit to like Saturday in terms of like reading goals and like monthly goals. Thursday is not a great day to like start new goals. So with all of that kind of chattiness being said, let's just jump right into the stats for the month. So of the 11 books that I've read, 5 of those books were physical books, 2 were audiobooks, but I think also slowed down my reading because, as I've talked about a couple of times on my channel, I'm a terrible audiobook listener, and so having an audiobook on the go actually just really slows me down because I never listen to it. And then 4 of the books were ebooks. And then of those 11, additionally, 2 were library books, 1 was borrowed from a friend, 4 were from NetGallery, and the other 4 were from my shelves. And one of the audiobooks was from the library, and the other of which I'm counting as a book from my shelf, but I listened to it as an audiobook. 10 of the books were adult books, and only 1 was YA. 9 of the books were fiction, 1 was nonfiction, and 1 was a poetry collection, and the most common genre within fiction was literary fiction, which is pretty common for me. Then 8 of the 11 books were written by women, again, not really surprising, and 5 were written by authors of color, which is a little lower than I like it to be, but that's just kind of how this month shaped out, it seems. And then of those 11 books, 7 of them have been previously discussed somewhere on my channel, so as always, I will put a link to where I discuss those books down in the description box below, as well as a link up in the cards above whenever I get to those books. So with all of that being said, let's just go into my readings. So if you've not seen any of my wrap-ups before, the way that I do them is go through everything that I read during the month, in terms of rating from lowest to highest. And then any books that I've not previously talked about on my channel, I will review at the end of this video. I also wanted to point out, I think another reason why my reading was slightly low this month is that we were really all over the place in terms of star ratings. I read a lot of books this month that I just didn't really enjoy, many of which were not really by choice. So that was fun. I think that definitely slowed my reading down a lot as well, just because I wasn't enjoying the books that I was reading, and when I'm not enjoying a book, it takes me a really long time to read it, as I think is true of many people. So there were a lot of books this month that I like pushed through and finished, when in reality I think it would have been better for me and my reading if I had just given up on them, but that wasn't the case. So I had two 2-star reads this month, the first of which was Master of Poisons by Andrea Hairston, and the second of which was The Sellout by Paul Beatty. Then I had two 2.5-star reads this month, the first of which was Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered by Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff, and the second of which was A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier. Then I had three 3-star reads this month, the first of which was The Fascinators by Eliopulos. Then I had The House of Broken Angels by Alberto Urrea, and then I had Daughter of Black Lake by Cathy Buchanan. And those second two are the ones that I finished at the very beginning of October. Then I had one 3.5-star read this month, which was A Place for Us by Fatima, Farheen, and Mirza. And then I had two 4-star reads this month, the first of which was She Would Be King by Wayetu More, and the second was Tools of Engagement by Tessa. And then I had one 4.5-star read this month, which was How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons by Kingsolver. So as I said previously, 7 of these books I've already reviewed elsewhere on my channel. Those will all be linked up in the cards above or down in the description box below. So let's get into the 4 books that I've not reviewed elsewhere on my channel, which were The House of Broken Angels by Alberto Urrea, Daughter of Black Lake by Cathy Buchanan, Tools of Engagement by Tessa, and How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons by Kingsolver. So starting with the book that I enjoyed the least and moving to the book that I enjoyed the most, we have Daughter of Black Lake by Cathy Buchanan. This was an early copy sent to me from Riverhead through NetGalley, and it comes out this coming Tuesday on the 6th of October. And honestly, this one was fine for me, but not particularly memorable. So Daughter of Black Lake follows a mother and a daughter, Devout and Hobble respectively, who live as bog dwellers, or what we would call Celtics, the indigenous group that lived in Britain at the time of the Roman invasion, around the time that Rome is invading the island. So with our 2 alternating timelines, we follow Devout's kind of secretive past and uncovering her relationships, and then we also follow Hobble, who is Devout's daughter, who has some prophetic abilities that come, I believe, alongside her disability. As you may be able to tell from her name, she does walk with a limp. And in Hobble's perspective, we follow Hobble as she becomes more and more endangered by a very power-hungry druid that has taken over their small community as a kind of outpost for rebellion. I was intrigued about this book when I first requested it on NetGalley, in part because it is a Riverhead title and I really like Riverhead, but also because I studied Latin in high school and then in college, and so I am very interested in like the classical period and classical antiquity, particularly as kind of understanding areas of the Roman Empire that are not the Mediterranean. I think kind of what we know about the people living in Gaul and Eastern Europe and Britain at this time is very interesting, especially because we just don't know all that much about them. So I was really intrigued to see that history portrayed in a novel, which is in large part why I picked it up. However, I didn't really find that the historical accuracy and like authentic research piece of this novel, as compared to a lot of the historical fiction that I like to read, to be on par really. I don't think that this novel used kind of historical data in a way that was super satisfying, and I just didn't really feel like I learned that much about the historical time period other than what I already know, which granted is like fairly limited. So I didn't really feel there was much historical research that went into this novel, which is always something that I look for in historical fiction, especially about a time period that maybe is not super well known in history. So yeah, I felt like that was kind of a missed opportunity to explore and uncover more of the kind of nuances that made the Celtic culture and community special, as opposed to a general kind of hunter-gatherer community, which is how it read to me. And then additionally, I just wasn't really that interested in the plot as it unfolded. I was initially intrigued by Hobble as a character, but her plot kind of devolves, and I'll talk a bit more about some other issues that I found with the book in just a minute. But then also on Devout's side, I just really did not care whatsoever about her subplot as it involved basically her being like torn between 2 love interests, and so it totally devolved into this like, will they, won't they get together? What is the kind of secrets? Why is she with this person now when she was with someone previously? And I just truly like didn't care. It felt to me a very much a like commercial fiction-y, and I don't want to say that in a negative way, as I do like commercial fiction. I just wasn't expecting it from this particular book. Especially did not like it because I found her kind of primary love interest in her chapters, which she is involved with this young man named Ark, who is different than Hobble's father, as we learn during Hobble's section, whose name is Smith. And I just didn't really like Ark. I didn't think he was a very well developed character or like all that interesting, so I didn't really understand the draw or the like reason why that was a whole like subplot, to be perfectly honest. And it does come back in Hobble's section towards the end, but I thought that like returning and kind of tying the two stories together truly to just be absurd and like unnecessary and, you know, not well thought out really. So I was not very impressed by the way that the two stories came together at the very end. But then finally, I also wanted to point out, given that Hobble's storyline primarily focuses on her disability, Hobble does walk with a limp, as is indicative of her name, which in the community people are given names based on kind of defining characteristics of their personality or of their trade. So for example, Smith is called Smith because he's part of the Smith clan. He's a blacksmith by trade. There's also Hunter and Carpenter. And then women, it appeared through the novel that women had names primarily using defining traits about them. So there was a character named Reddish because of her red hair. Devout was named Devout because she was very kind of closely connected to Mother Earth. And then Hobble is named Hobble because she does walk with this limp. And honestly, I just felt very odd about the disability representation in this book, and I will be very intrigued to see Own Voices reviews about the disability representation in this book, because I just didn't really feel like it was very nuanced or appropriate. And I do think there is kind of room for discussion of the ways in which people with disabilities historically have potentially been marginalized by their communities and potentially villainized. Like, I think that's a very interesting discussion. I just don't think it was done very well in this novel. It didn't, to me, given the like amount of value judgment placed by the community and then kind of by the novel at large on being able-bodied, did not feel like it was kind of adequately complicating the narrative surrounding like a person with a disability, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was very iffy on the whole disability representation, particularly as it relates to a kind of central plot point in the book that I don't entirely want to spoil. Actually, I'll just like put spoilers here and talk about it in depth, and if you want to know, you can like continue watching, and if not, then once spoiler goes away, you can come back. So in the novel, there is kind of a old tradition within their community of potential human sacrifice, particularly sacrificing people that are not able-bodied, and that, while potentially historically accurate, unfortunately the author does not include any like historical text, it seems, on like disability and Celtic culture in kind of her author's note. I just didn't really think that was necessary of like including this plot line of people who were not able-bodied were literally like sacrificed to the gods. And so there is a concern and like a fear throughout the novel that Hobble, given her disability, is going to be sacrificed by this power-hungry druid, and I just did not feel comfortable really with that whole element of the story, and kind of wish it had been reworked potentially so that Hobble was not going to literally be killed for not being able-bodied, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was not a huge fan of that element of the story, and I just don't really think it was super necessary, and it definitely like brought my rating down pretty significantly, and I will be very intrigued to kind of read other reviews kind of complicating that aspect of this novel, as I just didn't really think it was very good. Overall, it was pretty average. I didn't enjoy it all that much, but there wasn't anything that I like actively super hated about it, so I felt like 3 stars was kind of a fair rating. So that was Daughter of Black Lake. I'm not entirely sure I would even really recommend it, but I did read it this month. So then moving on to the next 3-star read that I read this month that I've not previously talked about on my channel, we have House of Broken Angels by Alberto Urrea, which I was reading for Latinx Heritage Month. Urrea is a Mexican-American man, and I started this one during the Latinx-thon, but then did not finish it until, as I said, just yesterday or 2 days ago. So this one tells the story of the De La Cruz family, and particularly Big Angel, who's the patriarch of the family, who is dying. He has cancer and he's going to be dying very soon, and the family is all coming together to bury Big Angel's mother. but also to celebrate Big Angel's birthday, which some of the characters know that it will likely be Big Angel's last birthday. Other characters kind of learn that over the course of the novel. And in short, it's really just kind of a celebration of life and family, and kind of how do we celebrate loved ones even if we have complicated relationships with those loved ones. And by the end, I did really enjoy this one, but I will say, for only being like 325 pages, at times it felt like a major slog to get through. Especially during the middle third, there's a whole section that to me did not really come together with the rest of the novel in a very satisfying way. It's called Then, and it's about 40 pages long, and honestly I just didn't really understand why it was in the novel, to be perfectly honest. I do think this could have been like novella length, and I think it would have been more poignant and kind of to the point. Also, about a quarter of the way through this one, picked it up on audiobook because I thought that would potentially make me more inclined to read it, because at that point I had started to lose interest, but I was kind of intrigued enough to continue reading. And also, as I said, it's relatively short, so I was like, maybe the audiobook will help me like get through this faster. And I didn't realize until the very end that Urrea actually reads the audiobook himself, which I think he did a really great job. I will warn anyone interested in picking up the audiobook for this that he is one of the slowest audiobook readers I've maybe ever listened to. I usually pick up audiobooks and read them at about the speed that I read in my head, because I often read along with the text as I'm listening, and it's just kind of off-putting to be listening to a story at a slower pace than my eyes are moving through the page. And this one I had to boot up to like 2.25 speed to just get it up to the speed that I read in my head, which was surprising. I usually am not that fast of a reader, but I think Urrea just like was really taking his time to probably, you know, emphasize different things that he thought was important in the story. But I am not keen enough on audiobooks to really appreciate any of that type of, you know, additional storytelling that can happen through an audiobook. So I was just surprised by how slowly he reads this book. But I do think he does a good job, and I do think him reading the audiobook adds kind of an important element to the story, particularly as in the author's note, as he discusses, while this is not an autobiographical work by any means, it is inspired by and also a way for Urrea to have worked through his older brother's death, as his older brother also buried their mother on the day before his birthday and then had a big birthday party that was kind of a last hurrah, very similar to Big Angel in this novel. I found that element of like what inspired this story to be really poignant, and it did enhance my reading experience having read that author's note and like knowing the kind of background of the story. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think I appreciated having read this book, and I definitely want to check out more of Urrea's work. I will also say though that, and this is not just true of the author, I think this is true of most male identifying authors for me personally, that the way like sex and sensuality was discussed in this book was not really my cup of tea. I don't really like discussions of sex and sensuality and sexuality that are kind of focused on the male gaze. It's just not something that appeals to me. Objectifying women, not really my thing. And so this book kind of fell into a lot of those tropes that I find very frequently with male identifying writers, and that was not really something I enjoyed very much. So like, do be forewarned, if that is something that you like just don't feel comfortable reading, I would potentially steer clear of this book, just because the way women's bodies get discussed in this book sometimes bordered on inappropriate to me in terms of like the objectification of women. So yeah, was not a huge fan of that element of this book, but I did like the kind of explorations of like family and reconciliation and celebrating the lives of loved ones. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars as well. It was fine, but definitely not like a favorite of the year. So the next book that I've talked about also kind of falls into some more like stereotypical ideas of gender and sex and sensuality, which was Tools of Engagement by Tessa Bailey. This one was also provided to me as an early copy through Nick Alley from Avon, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and this one came out on September 22nd, so it is available now if you're interested in picking it up. And I overall enjoyed this one. As I said, there definitely was some very stereotypical reinforcement of like gender roles, which I really didn't enjoy, but I think having read Tessa Bailey's work before, I do know that she just relies heavily on stereotypical tropes of gender and gendered expectations and like sex and sensuality in general. That's just kind of her bread and butter. So knowing that going in, I think I was able to kind of write it off a bit more than potentially with some other books. But this is the third in the Hot and Hammered romance series, which follows a number of siblings in this small town in Long Island. And this one was the eldest sister, Bethany's story, along with Wes, who is a younger man from Texas. He's only about 23, 24, who has moved to their small town in Long Island to take care of his niece, as his sister, who's the niece's mother, has needed some time just away from her child. Her marriage had recently fallen apart, and also Wes's sister, whose name I can't remember, was just kind of going through some tough times. Both of them went through the foster care system and I think are dealing with the repercussions of a lot of the behaviors that they developed as coping mechanisms, like going through the foster care system, are kind of manifesting themselves in some negative ways for Wes's sister. So she is kind of off working through some stuff, and so Wes has come to take care of his 5-year-old niece. And I actually really enjoyed that element of the story. I love stories where a parental figure comes into the picture who is not a biological parent, but who provides kind of better parenting than the biological parents can provide. I think discussing the importance of a loving parental figure, even if it's not a biological one, is something that I just really enjoy in fiction, and I thought it was done pretty well in this one, as Wes kind of grapples with how much he is going to care for his niece, but also, like, I didn't choose to be a father to this niece, but I'm realizing that it's what I have to do, and I'm like willing to step up to the plate in that way. I thought was done really well and definitely enhanced my reading experience of this one. I also just liked Wes and Bethany's banter. They have kind of a like hate to love situation happening that I think was established in the second one, which I didn't read because I heard it was just like a little too full of very stereotypical problematic gender ideas, and so I wasn't interested in reading that one. But I enjoyed their banter quite a bit in this one, and the kind of discussions on how having a romantic partner can help you kind of grow into yourself and gain confidence, but also that needs to begin with you. I thought the way that both of the characters grew with the help of one another, but mainly because the other one provided support for them to grow themselves, was really nicely done as well. And yeah, overall I just thought this one was like pretty fun. Would recommend it. I think Tessa Bailey is a fun writer, although you do have to kind of get over the hump of how misogynistic and like stereotypical her ideas of gender sometimes are presented in her romance novels, which I do think is sometimes an issue within the romance genre, I think. And while most of the romance that I read doesn't really rely that heavily on gendered expectations, I do think that is something that some romance readers like, and so Tessa Bailey falls more into like that category than the kind of diverse, subverting the genre type of romances that I usually like to read. And then finally, I also did like in this one that Bethany and Georgie, who's the main lead in the first one, Fix Her Up, their brother Steven, who was just an absolutely terrible person in Georgie's story, he did have some character development in this one that I did appreciate quite a bit. So yeah, overall I think this one, you know, Tessa Bailey is working through getting over her reliance on gendered expectations, I'm hoping. And so this one definitely kind of had some improvement on that front than from what I saw in Fix Her Up. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It was like a fine romance, but I definitely would only recommend it to readers of romance who are either aware of Tessa Bailey's reliance on gendered stereotypes or are kind of situated themselves comfortably enough in understanding and complicating the ideas of gender that they can like read this with a critical eye. And then finally we have How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons by Barbara Kingsolver. This is Barbara Kingsolver's first, I believe, bind up of her poetry. I believe she's published poetry in other kind of literary magazines and stuff previous to this, but this was her first kind of actual collection of poetry, and I really enjoyed it. Barbara can do no wrong in my eyes, really. I love her. She's one of my favorite novelists by far, and I do think a lot of the themes she explores in her novels you can kind of see in her poetry, such as, you know, themes of love and marriage and sexuality and nature and protecting the environment, that are all things that I enjoy reading about and thinking about, and so I enjoyed seeing Barbara's kind of take on a lot of those things. This poetry collection also reminded me quite a bit of Mary Oliver's poetry, so if you're a fan of Mary Oliver's work, I think you would definitely enjoy this poetry collection as well, as it has a lot of the same kind of accessibility that I think Mary Oliver's poetry does, as well as also the kind of love and metaphorical use of nature is very prominent in both of their works. So yeah, if you are a Mary Oliver fan, if you're a Barbara Kingsolver fan, I would recommend checking out this poetry collection. It was fun. I read it on a little Saturday morning and it was just a lovely time. So yeah, that is How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons. Definitely, I'm hoping to get a copy of this one for myself, and this one I also read as an early e-copy from NetGalley, and this was published by Harper, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, obviously, and came out on the 22nd of September as well. So this one is also available in case you're interested in reading it yourself. So those are all the 11 books that I read in the month of September, and then moving into October a little bit. I am probably going to finish 2 more books today, as I believe I said at the beginning of the video. This is editing Jenny here on Monday afternoon to tell you I did not finish either of those books yesterday, nor will I finish them today, but I am excited to finish them at some point in the near future. But I just wanted to get this like filmed and edited before I like sat down and chill read for the rest of the afternoon. So I'll quickly go over the 2 books that I'm reading, but I will talk about them in depth either in a Friday Reads video or like mid-month wrap-up sometime later in the month. First of which is I'm still working through The Pot Liquor Papers by John T. Edge. I only have like 50 or 60 pages of this left, and that's like an hour of the audiobook. So I definitely do think I will finish this one today, but I just didn't want to like finish it and then film the video. So there's that one, and then the other one that I'm working through that I'm hoping to finish today is Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam. This one is intriguing for sure. It's a bit overwritten. I hesitate to say that because it's usually a pretty negative thing to say about a book, but it's just very detail oriented, which is interesting to read in a thriller because usually I feel like thrillers read really fast, but if it's something's really detailed oriented, that slows you down. So it's kind of a weird reading experience because you want to take in all the details, and I think Alam is a very observant writer, which I think will make for a very interesting thriller, but it is like slowing down the kind of pace of the work, if that makes sense. So very intrigued about this one, only about 15% of the way through, so have a lot of reading to go, but the kind of weirdness has already started, so I'm pretty sure it'll pick up speed quite soon. So I think with that being said, that concludes the end of this video. If you found me through this video, I'd love to have you stick around and subscribe. Additionally, if you have read any of these books or are now interested in reading them, I'd love to hear your comments down in the comment section below. I hope you're having a great rest of your day whenever you're watching this, and I will talk to you next time.